the Ides of March, a day etched in blood. In the year 44 BCE, Julius Caesar, Rome's Colossus, walked into the Senate. He was a conqueror, a statesman, a living god to some. But enemies lurked in the shadows, their daggers were sharpened, their hearts filled with a desperate resolve. The fate of Rome hung precariously. Caesar was far more than a mere politician. He was an earthquake, shaking the foundations of the Republic. His legions had subdued Gaul. His reforms promised a new Rome. He had crossed the forbidden Rubicon and vanquished his rival Pompey the Great. Rome itself lay nestled in the palm of his hand. The common people adored him, yet within the hallowed halls of the Senate, fear festered. Senators whispered of kings and tyranny. The assassins struck with shocking speed. A flurry of blows. Caesar the Invincible stumbled and fell. 23 wounds bore witness to the betrayal. Sic semper tyrannis, the conspirators might have cried, thus always to tyrants. But their act of liberation unleashed furies. Anarchy gripped the city of Rome. A grieving populace demanded vengeance. Civil war once again bared its teeth. The death of Caesar was no ordinary event. It was a thunderclap that echoed through the ages. History itself seemed to pause, then swerve violently. The Roman world, as it was known, changed forever. So let us pose the great question, the tantalizing what if. What if Julius Caesar had survived March 15th? Imagine the plot discovered moments before. Imagine Caesar, perhaps warned by a loyal friend, choosing a different path. Or picture him, the seasoned general, fighting off his attackers. A single twist of fate, a changed outcome in that crowded Senate house. The river of history would have carved a new channel. The world we know might never have been. Why does this particular counterfactual scenario captivate us so? Because Caesar was not a man to rest on his laurels. He stood on the brink of new monumental endeavors. Further reforms were surely planned for Rome. Vast new conquests beckoned in the east. The mighty Parthian Empire loomed as his next target. His restless energy, his boundless ambition promised more change. His survival would mean a continued whirlwind of action. He was a force that reshaped everything he touched. In this exploration, we shall venture down that unlit road. We will ponder the myriad possibilities. How would Rome itself have transformed under his extended rule? Would his legions have pushed the frontiers even further, expanding the eagle's shadow across new lands, new peoples? Could the Senate have ever truly been tamed? Or would new conspiracies have inevitably arisen from the shadows? We aim to trace the ripples, the far-reaching consequences of one man's life extended beyond its fated end. This is not merely an idle game of speculation, it is an intellectual adventure. Method to understand the profound weight of actual events, to appreciate the significance of Caesar's life, and the cataclysmic impact of his untimely death. By imagining a world where he survived, we illuminate the critical junctures of history, the fragile interplay of individual agency and grand historical forces. Join us on this journey. Let us peer beyond the veil of what was and explore the fascinating contours of the Rome that might have been. Gaius Julius Caesar hailed from an ancient patrician family. The Julians traced their lineage to Aeneas and thus to Venus. Divine blood, they claimed, flowed in their veins. Yet in Caesar's youth their political fortunes were modest. He was ambitious, driven by a hunger for renown. Rome was a city of fierce competition, a stage for men of towering ambition. Caesar was determined to play a leading role. He possessed charm, intellect, and a ruthless will. These were the raw materials of a legend. His early career was a careful climb up Rome's political ladder. There was the path to power. Caesar served as a military tribune, then quaestor. He honed his skills in oratory and administration. He cultivated friendships and incurred significant debts. These debts were investments in his future glory. He understood the power of popular appeal. The common folk of Rome saw in him a champion. Even then, some senators watched him with unease. His confidence bordered on audacious. The formation of the first triumvirate was a masterstroke, an unofficial yet immensely powerful alliance. Caesar joined forces with Pompey the Great, Rome's foremost general, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, its wealthiest man. Together, these three men could bypass the Senate's obstruction. They could carve up the Republic's opportunities. Caesar secured the coveted consulship, then crucially the proconsulship of Gaul. This was his chance for military glory, the foundation for ultimate power. Even before his legions marched north, fear began to coil. Within the marble halls of the Curia, whispers grew. Caesar's methods as consul had been unorthodox. He had often ignored senatorial opposition. He pushed through legislation benefiting the people and himself. His alliance with Pompey and Crassus alarmed traditionalists. They saw the Republic's norms eroding. They sensed a man who would not be easily contained. His ambition was too vast, his spirit too independent. The seeds of future conflict were already sown deep. The Gallic Wars spanned nearly a decade of brutal conflict. Caesar led his legions through forests, across rivers, over mountains. He faced fierce tribes united and alone. His military genius shone brightly. He was a brilliant strategist, a master of logistics. An inspiring commander sharing his soldiers' hardships, he meticulously documented his campaigns in his. These dispatches, sent back to Rome, were masterful propaganda. They built his legend, year by bloody year. Gaul was being brought to heel, enriching Rome and Caesar. The conquest of Gaul transformed Caesar's standing. Vast territories were added to Roman dominion. An immense river of gold, silver and slaves flowed to Rome. This wealth further fueled Caesar's political machinery. His soldiers, forged in the crucible of war, were fiercely loyal. They looked to Caesar, not the Senate, for their rewards. His popularity among the Roman plebs soared to new heights. He was the conqueror, the man of action. The Senate, however, watched his growing power with increasing dread. He was becoming too strong, too independent. The bonds of the triumvirate began to fray. Crassus, seeking his own military glory, perished in Parthia. Julia, Caesar's daughter and Pompey's wife, had died. This personal link between the two titans was severed. Pompey, once Caesar's ally, drifted back towards the senatorial elite. They saw Pompey as their champion against Caesar's ambition. The Senate issued demands. Caesar must disband his army. He must return to Rome as a private citizen. To do so would be to face certain prosecution by his enemies. Caesar stood at the banks of the Rubicon River. This small stream marked the boundary of his province. To cross it with his army was an act of treason. It meant civil war. The Senate had thrown down the gauntlet. Caesar weighed his options, his destiny in the balance. Alea iacta est, he famously declared. The die is cast. He led his 13th legion across the forbidden water. The Roman Republic was plunged into internal conflict once more. Section 3. The die is cast: dictatorship and reform. The civil war was swift and decisive. Caesar's legions outmaneuvered Pompey's forces. The Battle of Pharsalus shattered Pompey's army. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was assassinated. Caesar pursued his enemies relentlessly. He fought campaigns in Egypt, Africa and Spain. He displayed clemency to many defeated Romans, but the old order was broken. Caesar returned to Rome, the undisputed master. Power coalesced around him. The Senate showered him with honors. He was appointed dictator, first for a year, then for 10, then finally dictator perpetuo dictator for life. He held the consulship repeatedly. He was granted tribunician powers, making his person sacrosanct. He controlled state finances, foreign policy and appointments. The traditional mechanisms of republican government became mere formalities. Rome was a republic in name only. Its fate rested in the hands of one man. With supreme authority, Caesar embarked on ambitious reforms. He aimed to address the deep-seated problems of the late Republic. He reformed the Roman calendar, creating the Julian calendar, a system so effective it remains the basis for our own. He initiated vast public works projects. He planned new colonies and distributed land to his veterans. He extended Roman citizenship to many provincial communities. His vision was for a more integrated, more efficient Roman world. He sought to bind the disparate parts of the vast territories together. His energy seemed boundless, his plans far-reaching. Yet it was this very accumulation of power that sealed his doom. The title of dictator for life was profoundly unsettling. To many senators it sounded too much like king. The word was anathema in Rome. A deep-seated fear of monarchy had existed since the Republic's founding. Caesar's purple robes, his statues, his perceived arrogance all fueled the suspicion that he aimed to establish a dynasty. The conspirators saw themselves as defenders of liberty, tyrannicides striking down a man who would be king. His reforms, however beneficial, could not outweigh this ultimate fear. The Ides of March, a day of bloodshed. The plot against Caesar was born in hushed whispers. It festered in the hearts of proud Roman senators. Men like Brutus and Cassius led the way. They believed Caesar aimed to be king. The ancient Roman fear of monarchy burned fiercely. They saw themselves as patriots. Their daggers were not just for Caesar. An idea of freedom was slipping away. They yearned for a return to senatorial rule. The Ides of March arrived. It was a day heavy with foreboding. Caesar had been warned by soothsayers, yet he dismissed these omens. He decided to attend the Senate meeting. The session was held in the theatre of Pompeii. The conspirators waited, their nerves taut. Each carried a dagger beneath his toga. Their resolve was set, their target unsuspecting. As Caesar took his seat, the signal was given. Tullius Cimber approached him with a petition. Then the others swarmed him. The first blow was struck, then another. Caesar tried to defend himself. He was surrounded, outnumbered, betrayed. Some he had even pardoned. The scene was one of brutal violence. The air filled with shouts and steel. His toga was now stained crimson. Caesar fell at the foot of Pompey's statue. An ironic, bloody end to their rivalry. He had suffered 23 stab wounds. Only one proved truly fatal. Legend tells us his last words were to Brutus, "Kai su teknon," "You too, my child?" Or perhaps the more famous Latin "Et tu, Brute?" The man who had conquered Gaul lay dead. The liberators raised their bloodied daggers. They declared tyranny slain. But their triumph was short-lived. Section 2, Rome in turmoil, the power vacuum. The aftermath of Caesar's murder was chaos. Senators fled in terror, fearing for their lives. The city held its breath in stunned silence. The assassins misjudged the public mood. Caesar's death left a dangerous power vacuum. Mark Antony acted swiftly, securing Caesar's will. He turned grief into rage at Caesar's funeral. The crowd became a furious mob. The liberators fled, leaving Rome unstable. The struggle for power had just begun. Into this volatile mix stepped a new, unexpected player. Gaius Octavius, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted son. He was only 18 years old when Caesar was murdered. Upon hearing the news, he sailed to Italy to claim his inheritance. This inheritance was not just Caesar's wealth, but his potent name. Many dismissed him as a boy, too young and inexperienced, but Octavian, as he became known, possessed cunning and ruthless ambition. He quickly gathered support from Caesar's veterans. He presented himself as the true heir to Caesar's legacy. A dangerous new force had entered the Roman political arena. Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian soon realized they needed each other, at least for a time, to deal with their common enemies. They formed the Second Triumvirate, a formal three-man dictatorship. Unlike the first, this triumvirate was legally constituted. It possessed immense power to make laws and govern. One of their first acts was a brutal wave of proscriptions. They listed their enemies and offered rewards for their deaths. Cicero, the great orator and opponent of Antony, was among the victims. The triumvirs then turned their attention to Caesar's assassins. Brutus and Cassius were finally defeated at the Battle of Philippi. The defeat of the conspirators did not bring lasting peace. The triumvirate itself was an alliance of ambitious rivals. Lepidus was soon sidelined, leaving Antony and Octavian. They divided the Roman world between them. Antony took the wealthy east, Octavian the west. Antony's relationship with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, became a scandal. Octavian, a master of propaganda, portrayed Antony as decadent. He painted him as a thrall to a foreign queen, betraying Roman values. Tensions escalated, inevitably leading to another civil war. The fate of Rome would be decided in a final epic confrontation. The decisive clash came at the naval battle of Actium in 31 BCE. Octavian's forces, commanded by the brilliant Agrippa, triumphed. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, where they later committed suicide. Octavian was now the undisputed master of the Roman world. He returned to Rome not as a king, but as a restorer of the Republic, or so he claimed with characteristic shrewdness. He gradually accumulated powers and titles. In 27 BCE, the Senate granted him the honorific Augustus. This marked the traditional end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire, with Augustus as its first emperor. Let us now step into the realm of what if. Imagine the Ides of March dawning differently. Perhaps a loyal informant reaches Caesar in time. A note reveals the treacherous conspiracy. Or maybe Caesar listens to Calpurnia's pleas. Her dreams finally convince him. He decides against attending the Senate. The conspirators face a void. Their intended victim is not where they expected. The intricate web of their plot begins to fray. Alternatively, picture Caesar entering the theatre of Pompeii. The assassins, tense and ready, begin to close in, but this time, something goes awry for them. Perhaps one conspirator hesitates, his nerve failing him, or a loyal senator shouts a warning. Caesar reacts with lightning speed. His instincts take over. He deflects the first blow, drawing his own stylus. A chaotic struggle erupts. The element of surprise is lost. The plot exposed, the assassins thwarted. If Caesar avoids the Senate, the conspiracy might be uncovered swiftly. His guards would round up the plotters, their identities revealed, their treason laid bare before Rome. If the attack happens but fails, Caesar survives. Wounded perhaps, but alive, his aura of invincibility amplified. The attackers would be quickly subdued or killed by his supporters. The Senate floor becomes their prison. The liberators become failed traitors. Their bid to restore the Republic crumbles into dust. The immediate aftermath would be electrifying. Rome would be thrown into a different kind of turmoil. Not the chaos of a power vacuum, but the shock of a failed coup. Caesar, having stared death in the face, would be forever changed. His resolve might harden. His suspicion of the senatorial elite deepen. What mercy would he show to Brutus, Cassius, and the others? Would he offer clemency again, as he had to former enemies? Or would this ultimate betrayal demand a harsher, more final response? The Roman world would hold its breath, awaiting Caesar's next move. His survival would send shockwaves through every corner of the Republic. So Julius Caesar lives. The daggers of March have missed their mark. The man who bestrode the narrow world like a colossus still stands. This single event unlocks a cascade of possibilities. History veers onto an entirely new track. The assassination was a pivotal moment. What kind of future unfolds for Rome? The questions are immense. How does this one man's survival reshape an era? The narrative of our timeline dissolves. We explore a fascinating, unwritten history. The most immediate question concerns Rome's governance. Caesar already held immense power as dictator for life. Would he have pushed further, perhaps finally accepting a crown? Or would this near-death experience make him more cautious? Perhaps he would seek to solidify his reforms more carefully, creating a system that could outlast him, ensuring stability. How would the Senate react now that their ultimate sanction had failed? Would they become utterly subservient, their spirit broken? Or would new plots simmer beneath the surface, driven by fear and resentment? The relationship between Caesar and the old aristocracy enters a new tense phase. And what of Caesar's grand ambitions beyond Rome's borders? His planned Parthian campaign was imminent. A massive military undertaking against Rome's most formidable eastern rival. With Caesar at the helm, would Roman eagles fly victorious over Ctesiphon? Would the empire expand even further, absorbing new territories and cultures? His military genius was undeniable, his legions fiercely loyal. Success in Parthia would bring unimaginable glory and wealth. It could cement his authority beyond any challenge. But war is always uncertain. Even Caesar could face setbacks. The fate of vast swathes of the ancient world hangs in the balance. Ultimately, Caesar's survival forces us to reconsider everything. The rise of Augustus, the formation of the Principate, the subsequent Julio-Claudian dynasty, all these cornerstones of our history might never occur. Would there be a second triumvirate or more civil wars? Who would Caesar choose as his heir if he had the chance to plan? Could he have established a smoother, less bloody transition of power? The questions stretch out, touching every aspect of Roman life, from its laws and culture to its eventual destiny. Let us now delve deeper into these tantalizing possibilities. The Rome that might have been awaits our exploration. With the conspirators dealt with, Caesar's authority would be absolute. The failed assassination attempt would paradoxically strengthen his hand. Any lingering opposition in the Senate would be cowed into silence or perhaps eliminated entirely. Caesar now more than ever would be seen as touched by destiny. He could accelerate his program of reforms with renewed vigor. The city of Rome and the vast territories it controlled awaited his touch. He had already begun to reshape the Republic. Now, with a clear mandate born of survival, he could build anew. His vision for a more unified, efficient Roman world could take full flight. His plans for extending Roman citizenship would likely be fast-tracked. granting this coveted status to more provincials, especially in Gaul, Spain, and other loyal territories. This would foster greater integration and loyalty across the Roman domain. It would also expand the recruitment base for his legions. Land for his veterans, a promise always close to his heart, would be secured. Vast tracts, perhaps from confiscated estates of traitors, would be distributed. New colonies would spring up, spreading Roman culture and influence. These settlements would act as bastions of Roman power and provide a comfortable retirement for his loyal soldiers. The Senate itself would undergo further transformation. Caesar had already increased its numbers, packing it with his supporters. He might expand it even more, diluting the power of old aristocratic families. Perhaps he would introduce representatives from the provinces, making it a more imperial rather than solely Roman institution. Its role would likely become largely advisory, rubber-stamping his decisions. The Senate's ancient prestige might remain, but its true power would reside elsewhere, with Caesar and those he chose to empower. The machinery of state would be refashioned to serve his will. Efficiency and loyalty would be the new watchwords. Public works would continue to transform Rome's urban landscape. New temples, basilicas, libraries and forums would rise, reflecting Caesar's glory and providing for the needs of the populace. He understood the importance of bread and circuses, but also the lasting legacy of monumental architecture. Infrastructure projects like roads and aqueducts would connect the empire. His calendar reform was already a success. Now he might turn his attention to codifying Roman law, creating a clearer, more consistent legal framework. His aim, a stable, well-governed state answering to him. With domestic affairs under control, Caesar's gaze turned east to the Parthian Empire, Rome's great rival, where Crassus's defeat still stung. Caesar, eager to avenge this, planned a grand campaign. His legions, battle-hardened, would march east, facing Parthia's skilled cavalry and vast terrain. The wealth and glory of the east beckoned. This would be his ultimate military challenge. A victorious Caesar would reshape the known world. With his own life extended, Caesar would have more time to contemplate the long-term future of the Roman state he was forging. The question of succession would become paramount. He had no legitimate son of his own body to inherit his position. His adopted son, Octavian, was still a young man. Caesar might continue to groom Octavian, testing his abilities, providing him with military and administrative experience. Perhaps he would see in the young man the astuteness needed, the ruthlessness required to hold on to power. Octavian's path to prominence could be smoother under Caesar's direct tutelage. Alternatively, Caesar might look to other loyal and capable men. Mark Antony, his trusted lieutenant, was a proven general, though perhaps too volatile, too pleasure-seeking for Caesar's ultimate trust. There were other seasoned commanders and administrators in his circle. Caesar could formally designate an heir, or even a council of regency. He might try to establish a clear line of succession, hoping to avoid the bloody power struggles that often followed a strong man's death. His goal would be to ensure his reforms and his new order endured. He would not want his life's work to crumble into chaos. A stable transition was crucial for Rome's continued prosperity. A longer period of Caesar's rule might mean greater stability. His immense authority could suppress internal divisions. The transition to a monarchical system could be more gradual, less reliant on the civil wars that historically paved Augustus's path. Perhaps Caesar would slowly accustom Romans to the idea of one-man rule, not as a king, but as a perpetual protector of the state. He might even try to integrate his position into a modified republican framework, retaining some of the old forms while fundamentally changing the substance. This could lessen the shock and opposition to the new reality. A Caesarian peace could settle over the Roman world. However, sustained one-man rule, even Caesar's, carried inherent risks. Resentment among the old elite might smolder, awaiting an opportunity. The sheer burden of governing such a vast territory was immense. Could one man, however gifted, manage it all indefinitely? New conspiracies might arise, learning from the failures of the first. The threat of assassination would always linger in the shadows. His continued rule, while potentially stabilizing in the short term, was not a panacea. It might simply delay the inevitable power struggles or create new fault lines within the Roman political landscape. The question of what next would always loom large. Julius Caesar lived, the assassins had failed. His power, immense, now seemed unshakable. He was dictator for life, the master of Rome. But one question hung heavy kingship. The word king was reviled in Rome. It conjured images of ancient tyranny. Would Caesar dare to claim this title? Public opinion was crucial. The plebs adored Caesar, seeing him as their champion. They might have accepted him as king for continued peace, yet the idea of a monarch was unsettling. The traditions of the Republic still held sway. Caesar, the master politician, gauged this mood carefully. Within the Senate, the reaction was clear. Many senators harbored deep resentment. The thought of a king ruling Rome was anathema. A formal declaration of kingship might spark fresh resistance. Even a cowed Senate could become dangerous. The threat of renewed civil war loomed large. Perhaps Caesar, ever the pragmatist, would choose a different path. Not outright kingship, but a gradual transition. He already held supreme power. Dictator for life, consul, imperator, pontifex maximus. He controlled the legions, the treasury, the law courts. Why risk everything for a title that could provoke outrage? He could continue to rule through republican structures, bending them to his will. This new order, forged by a living Caesar, might evolve organically. He could further consolidate his powers, making them hereditary, perhaps by formally adopting Octavian, ensuring his chosen successor was accepted by the Senate and army. His influence could shape the next generation of Roman leaders. The Senate might be further stacked with his appointees, becoming a council of the realm rather than an independent power. The transition to an imperial system could be smoother. Could such a transition have occurred with less bloodshed? If Caesar had lived, his overwhelming authority might have prevented civil wars. The shift to an empire might have been an evolution, not a revolution. Rome would still become an empire, but its journey there would be profoundly altered. The Colossus of Rome, a new trajectory. Caesar's survival would have altered Rome's path. The destructive civil wars might never happen. No bloody power struggle between Antony and Octavian. Rome could consolidate its strength earlier. Under Caesar's firm hand, centralization would accelerate. The state becomes even more his instrument. This internal stability allows Rome to project its power outwards. A stronger, more unified Rome faces the world, its resources less depleted by internal fighting. Caesar was a man of boundless ambition. His eyes were set on the Parthian Empire in the east. With the conspirators crushed, this campaign would proceed. Imagine Caesar leading his legions to victory against Parthia. Rome's eastern frontiers would expand significantly. New provinces, new wealth, new peoples under Roman rule. The empire's dominion would stretch further than ever imagined. The impact on Europe would be profound and far-reaching, a more dominant Roman presence lasting for longer. The Roman footprint on Europe becomes deeper, more indelible. Echoes through time, culture, faith, and identity. The spread of Latin culture would accelerate. With Caesar alive, Rome's influence would be pervasive. Latin, the language of power, would entrench itself further. Across Gaul, Iberia, and North Africa, local tongues might recede faster. This could lead to a more linguistically homogeneous Western Roman world. The very words we use today in many European languages could shift. Beyond Europe, Caesar's survival would reshape the East. A successful Parthian campaign means Rome's eastern border is transformed. Persian history takes a dramatically different turn. Roman influence could extend along the Silk Road much earlier. Direct contact with a Roman-controlled East changes trade and cultural exchange. The rise of Christianity is another critical area of impact. Jesus was born during the reign of Augustus. Early Christianity spread within a specific Roman context. If Caesar lived, this context changes dramatically. Would a Caesarian dynasty be more tolerant or react harshly to a new faith? The conditions for the apostles' missions would be different. The persecution or acceptance of early Christians could follow a new path. The entire cultural and religious identity of the Western world is at play. Caesar's enduring imprint. Had Caesar lived, his reforms would have taken deeper root. His changes to the calendar would become universally adopted. His plans for citizenship and land distribution to veterans would be fully realized. The Caesarian vision for Rome would be purely his, a more integrated empire bound by his laws and generosity. The imperial line itself would be fundamentally different. There would be no Augustan Principate as we know it. Octavian might still rise, but as Caesar's chosen heir, or Caesar might have favored Mark Antony. The Julio-Claudian emperors might never have existed in that form. A Caesarian dynasty would shape the first centuries of Roman imperial rule. Caesar, not Augustus, would be the undisputed founder of the imperial age. His survival would elevate his status beyond even what it became. He would be the man who ended the Republic and forged the empire's early decades. His cult would likely become the central imperial religion. Roman identity would revolve around his monumental figure. The institutions of the old republic would fade faster. This empire would be born directly from Caesar's continued life, a more overtly autocratic system from its very inception. Reshaping the world's inheritance. The legacy reaching into our modern world would be transformed. Our concepts of government, influenced by Rome, would differ. Perhaps Caesarism as a political term would carry different connotations. The evolution of legal systems in Europe might follow altered paths. His direct, prolonged impact on Roman jurisprudence would be significant. The balance between individual liberty and state power could have been set on a different trajectory. The Julian calendar would be the unchallenged system. Its adoption worldwide might have been quicker, more complete. Subtle variations in how we measure our years could all trace back to Caesar's influence. His focus on infrastructure might have set an even more ambitious standard. The physical remnants of the Roman world could be grander, more cities bearing his name, more monuments to his extended reign. Language itself might have changed, a deeper, longer period of Roman cultural dominance under Caesar. The Romance languages might be closer to each other. The influence of Latin on Germanic languages could be more pronounced. Literature, rhetoric, and education would all feel this shift. The classical tradition inherited by the West would have a different accent. One man's survival cascades through millennia, altering the deep structures of civilization.